Welcome, everyone. My name is Dan Gerstein. I'm the CEO of Gotham Ghostwriters. Welcome to the second installment of our new phase of Ghostwriting Confidential. It's a series we started to kind of demystify the ghostwriting industry and the process of working with a ghostwriter, all with an eye towards helping prospective authors, particularly first-time authors, learn more about what it's best practices for choosing a ghostwriter, what it's like to work with them, how to make the most of the collaboration. And for this phase of the series, we are featuring an experienced ghostwriter once a week, short conversation, very focused on their experience and what they've learned from it and the wisdom that they can share with authors who are, exploring and considering working with a ghostwriter. So today we're joined by Bonnie Hearn Hill, who is an experienced writer and ghostwriter from California, if I'm right, just outside of Fresno. Longtime newspaper reporter. Bonnie, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't we start at kind of the very first phase of the process with, the selection of a ghostwriter. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking with new potential clients, what are some things they should be thinking about in how to choose the right partner for them?
I think what they have to think about, credentials are very important, of course, but it really comes down to chemistry. You're going to be working with this person. You're going to be trusting this person. This person is going to be everything from your best friend to your therapist. You'll need to ask sensitive questions. So you really need to not only see that this person is qualified to handle what you're writing, but also that you get along. And I found that the very best collaborations happen when you do have that chemistry.
Have you had any engagements where the relationship kind of frayed or fell apart and just didn't gel the way it should? And what did you learn from that experience that you can share with other people that benefit from that?
In my early days, I had that happen. It doesn't happen to me now. I'm more, I think, selective, and I think I know more about who's really serious and who really wants to do this. Usually in my early days, what I found was that I had made the decision to go with somebody when I wasn't 100% sure and where the person wasn't really passionate about the project. And I can do a lot for an author, but I can't create the passion for the project. So usually if we understand each other and we have a roadmap, an outline to work from, usually things go pretty smoothly.
And what are the kind of questions that authors should be asking potential collaborators when they're going through this selection process?
I think that they should first of all ask how they want to work. In other words, find out how rigid or flexible this person is for you, because you, the author, have to be comfortable. I have one author client right now who's in China, and she likes to work about 6 o'clock my time because it's about 10 o'clock her time, I think, or 11 in the morning. So that's how we work. Well, if I had a situation where I couldn't work at night, I wouldn't be the right author for her. I wouldn't be the right writer for her. So you really have to look at the flexibility, and you really have to think, you're the author. This is your book. So is this person going to be available in a way where you'll be comfortable working? I think that's a big part of it. Also find out how the writer likes to work. Because some of us work on Zoom, some of us work on phone, some of us work email, some of us don't. I'm really flexible with the authors I work with, but these are all things you need to know, because if you are a first-time author, you really need to be comfortable and you need somebody who's flexible.
That's really good advice. Mm-hmm. So let's move to the next phase. You're starting to work with an author. They've made the investment, signed the contract. What do they need to do to be prepared? What's kind of like the checklist you give your clients to sort of say, here's what we need to do to be able to kind of hit the ground running
Mm-hmm.
do this in an efficient way.
You know what really helps, I think, is to have a roadmap, to first create, and that doesn't mean that we might not follow that. I mean, we may find just when you follow a real roadmap, you may find an interesting side road, but I think it makes everyone a lot more comfortable and focused when we say, okay, today we're going to work on chapter 1 here, and we already know from the roadmap what we're going to talk about, but then it'll be more spontaneous. I recently worked with an author who'd been trying to write the book for 25 years. I'm happy to say that I found an agent for him, and it'll be coming out from a New York publisher. It was one of your clients early next year. But what he lacked was a roadmap. He didn't have the structure. So the first thing we did was create that roadmap. And then each time we talked, we knew exactly what we were going to do. We didn't know details because I like to do intuitive interviews, but we knew the subject matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you come up with a work plan at the beginning of the process to spell out, here's what the author is going to do, and here's what I'm going to do, to get clarity of expectations?
Exactly. And I do that pretty much right from the beginning because I can tell intuitively, I know what the author's going to need and what the author's strengths are. And so then I'll say, what if we do it this way? And then that way we're both in agreement and we both know exactly what to expect. You don't get surprises that way.
Got it. So once you have your kind of work plan and the roadmap in place, you have your blueprint for how you're going to do the book.
Right.
You kind of have a preferred process that you use as a default, or do you customize it every time based on what the author's bringing to the project?
I have a process that works really well, but it depends on the author entirely because some of my clients are not in this country and there are time zone preferences. Some of them have already tried to write the book and have a working draft. Some of them have nothing, and we start at the very beginning, which sometimes, believe it or not, is the easiest.
Right.
And then we go from there. I do like to start at the beginning and work my way through, especially with fiction projects. But I think in general, that usually works better. But again, it depends on what the author has.
Okay. Any cautionary tales from your experience that or examples you can cite where, the author, had an unrealistic expectation, and it led to kind of a real hurdle in the relationship?
One of my authors was told by somebody else that his book would make a movie and that he might even be able to star as himself. And so he came to me with that expectation. And so it was difficult for me to try to reach common ground because obviously getting a film, I've had but my own books option for film, but I've never had a film made. It's a whole different process. So I had to try to explain that we are writing the book for readers, and we are not writing the book because I'm going to promise you it's going to be a film, because I can't promise you that. So we have to get expectations. I think it's really important to know if I have a client who wants to go the traditional publishing route and get a literary agent, I will help them do that. I will help them. I do have those connections. And so if I know that's the expectation, and I believe that will happen with the book, which has happened with the last 2 projects that I worked on. They both ended up with literary agents and traditional publishing deals. Mm-hmm. So again, it's expectation.
Got it. It's funny you brought up someone else telling this guy that it should be a movie and maybe pumping up his expectations. Our experience is that more often than not, where engagements and collaborations run into trouble is if there's some third party who's either interfering with the project or giving the author contrary advice. Have you ever had a situation with like a spouse or a PR agent trying to insert themselves in the process, and how do you navigate that?
Yes, and right at the very beginning, we talk about that because really it's very helpful if everyone is on board because the spouse is going to be very involved. I have an author right now I just finished working with in Texas. He's it's a business book and he's amazing. And his spouse was involved in a really positive way, but I got her on board at the very beginning because if you can believe this, they were on a cruise and he was calling me from the cruise ship to work on this project. So I needed her on board because quite frankly, if I were on a cruise with my husband, I probably wouldn't be thrilled if he was working with a writer. So, but she was great. But I try at the beginning because if the spouse or if sometimes there'll be a well-meaning friend, I call it the English teacher next door. And the English teacher next door sometimes will be the one that says, oh, if I'd written it, I would have done it like this.
Right.
And the English teacher next door is a nice person, but probably is not a published writer and a trained credentialed editor. So we have to understand that it's the two of us. What I like to say is there are three of us at the table, only three of us, you, me, and the book. And only one of us really matters, and that's the book.
Got it. So going back to the question of how the book gets published, do you have a conversation up front with the author to kind of set their expectations? Because in some cases, maybe it's material that could be sold to a traditional publisher, and maybe it's not. But in some cases, we've found that there's no way that a traditional publisher would acquire it, and then you kind of have to feel an obligation to tell the client that, like, be really honest in setting their expectations that you can try, but it may not be the best use of your time.
I do that in the initial phone call, even before we've committed to work together, because I think it will help whoever the writer is if I'm not the writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I explain the different kinds of publishing. I explain hybrid publishing and how if it's a true hybrid, that's really a great way to go. I explain the pros and cons, and there are definite cons of traditional publishing. I can tell you that because I'm traditionally published. I explain self-publishing versus vanity publishing. And I also say, which I really think is true today, this is the best time since I've been writing to be an author because there are so many options.
I totally agree. It's a really, really good perspective. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the editing process. Once you have, either a chapter completed or you have the full manuscript, do you have kind of a standard process for making revisions and working with the author, or are you more, adaptive to what the author's preferences are? And have you, again, any best practices you've learned through your experience?
Yes, I found that it's better to fix it. You have to get it down, because if you don't get it down, that's why some of my authors have worked. One of my authors, a nurse, it took her 13 years. And then we did get a book deal for her. It was a true crime book, but she couldn't quite get it down. And you have to get it down. Once we have a chunk, I like to edit because it's a good teaching. As I said, I worked as an editor for many years and I enjoy the process. It's a very different process than writing. And so I like to do it first to let the author look at it, because then the author knows, okay, I know I told you this, but please don't ever mention my dog Spot. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I know I said it that way, but and this happens a lot where, because you trust me, you tell me things that maybe you don't want the world to know, because this book is going to outlive both of us. So you might tell me something and then say, let's not do it this way. Or maybe even it's something major. Maybe we decide to do the book, say it's a novel, and we decide to do it first person, I. and you read the first chapter and I read the first chapter and we say, you know what, this is not going to be a good thing. Let's do it third person. That can happen quite frequently. It happens in my own books. So I like to find out right away. I mean, really, even after a first chapter, I like to start doing some basic editing.
Got it. Let's, for last question, let's talk a little bit about voice.
Okay.
You know, again, one of the ways that collaborations can run into trouble is if they're the words on the page, the author feels they don't reflect their voice, and that doesn't sound like me. So how do you go about winning the author's confidence and making sure that the product really is the best version of their voice? And is there some tips that you can provide to authors to sort of say, here's the best way when you're working with a ghost to make sure that you're getting, you know, something that's authentically you?
Right. And I always start with a sample. I even do that before we're engaged if they want to, because I write fictional characters and I have to find their voices. And it's a lot easier to find a real person's voice. We usually what we do is if I talk to them, then I'll show them the sample. I'll say, here's what, even a short sample, even 500 words, you know, here's what I heard when we talked. I have a client in Norway who is a wonderful author. And with her first book, it won a National Writing Award. And it doesn't sound one bit like me. And one of my friends who's not a writer asked if I were jealous that she won this award. And I said, no, I'm proud. It's her book. How it gets here. How it gets here doesn't matter. It's your book and you wrote it. I am just a tool. So my job is to find out. It's more the job of the writer than it is the author. The author just has to know. I think an author recognizes when it's their voice and it doesn't read like a machine wrote it. And it should not read like a machine wrote it.
Could not agree more. And we're very optimistic that ChatGPT is not only not going to replace or displace us, it's going to elevate us, because it's going to make really great writing and collaborative writing stand out even more.
Well, and we are standing out more. You know, we're actually now a status symbol versus a secret. So that's kind of nice too, you know, that people now want to brag about who their collaborators are.
Yes.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bonnie. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. We hope this was helpful, and we'll be back next week with another writer from the Gotham Network. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.